Thank you guys for coming, and thank my students for coming. I'm going to ask you guys later to do something, so if you want to leave now. Okay, first of all, I'm not here to promote my school. I have enough students. It's very expensive and it's very time consuming, and most people really don't want to do it. And it's, it's not hard, but language is something that is a natural thing when we're kids. The problem when you're an adult is you think, okay, somebody mentioned learn one word a day. Yeah, excuse me, but to read the New York Times in your own language, you need 40,000 words. 40,000 words. And that's a 9th grade text. I don't know any 9th graders who do it, but. So basically, but I'm here really to tell those of you who have enough motivation and time, you're retired, how to do it. And I'll give you, and I'll leave the instructions behind if anybody wants to take a photo of it. So that's basically what I'm here for. Now, first thing you have to know about learning a language is that it's not hard. It's just repetition. How many times, Hansi?
64 times.
64 times over a period of 2 or 3 months, right? And it's also a subconscious process. Little kids, when they're, we'll go into that with I'm going to give you some theory and then I'm going to give you the practical part. But anybody who's lived in Ajijic for a while, go to a restaurant and the waiter speaks colloquial English. You're like, hey, where'd you live? California? No, I've never left Ajijic. What? And you speak English that well? Yeah. How'd you do it? Watching Friends. Watching Friends over and over in Spanish and then in English with the subtitles over and over. Kids got a lot of time. COVID, a lot of time with technology. So they take that time and over. They put it in the background and they learn English, colloquial English. Probably they can't read the New York Times, but it's enough for them to get a job and to get along well in the English language. An experience I had when I lived in what is now the ex-Yugoslavia in the early 80s, these kids, they were no good nicks, drug stealing, stuff like that. They lived in a small hamlet where we were living because my husband at that time was training babysitting dogs. They spoke perfect their own language, Slovene. There were 2 million people in Slovenia. They spoke Serbo-Croatian, which was the official language of Yugoslavia. They spoke really good English and Italian. And I'm like, where'd you guys go to school? We dropped out in 5th grade. Well, they had a lot of pot. And they had a long winter. And they had one DVD. Guess which one? Philip.
Friends.
Animal House. Oh, Animal House. And anybody remember Animal House? Oh, yeah. So these guys would get high, sit next to the Spagat, this wooden stove, and they'd watch, and then they'd take, who are you going to be this time? I'm going to be so-and-so. They knew it. They knew the whole thing. And from that, they were able then to watch other movies. Once you have, think of a jigsaw puzzle. When you first get it, it's nothing. You get the pieces on the corner, right? And then you start to fill them in. Once you have a few of them filled in, you can kind of guess, oh, this goes with this. That's how language works. You don't study it. Think about back in the day when you fill out an application for work. Education, right? And then a line, skills. What was under skills? Typing, computer, blah, 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 and language. So that tells you right there, language is a skill. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that the way everybody, including LCS, and anybody who teaches it here, or any pretty much Duolingo, all that, Rosetta Stone, Pilsner, it's all crap. Because, let me ask you, if you want a skill, I could have said shit. Anybody who wants a skill, for instance, you want to learn how to drive a car, okay? Do you start studying the workings of an internal combustion machine? No. If you want to learn how to swim, Do you start studying the physics of buoyancy or how much energy you expend while doing this or that? No, you do it. How do you get good at a skill, Ginger?
Practice.
Practice, practice, practice. I used to watch my dad hit the ball up against the wall playing tennis. I said, Dad, enough. He says, no, I got to do it without thinking. And that's where the repetition comes in. If you start thinking, forget all the part about knowledge of a language, conjugating verbs. The difference between por and para, can somebody tell me, ladies, si usted sabe la diferencia entre por y para? See, do you? Ser and estar. Come on, anybody? Phil, I bet you can tell me.
Por is when you need to use por, para when you need to use para.
Or somebody asked me the other day, why do they use ti, tu, and tus, and tuyo? And I say, here. And I have a whole page of explanation, and they looked and I said, So what's the secret of learning a language?
Listening.
Careful listening and careful imitation. Can you guys say it?
Careful listening.
Louder! Careful listening and careful imitation. Let's try it. Pendejo. Cabrón. Mejor cabrón. Que pendejo. What did I say, Phil?
I'm looking at how Tommy. You really like me.
I haven't known Phil for a long time. Anyway, so that's what it is. What it basically says, better to be a bastard than an asshole. It's a saying we have here. But anyway, I won't go into other ones. So, think about, anybody here have kids? Raise your hand if you have kids. Not many. Congratulations.
You're all over 50 years old.
Anybody who's had kids or nieces or nephews or anybody growing up little around them, and they start, they didn't, a woman that went to Columbia University and her husband, linguist, they decided to wire their house for language, and they wanted to know how many times the kid had to hear the word bottle before he got it. It was like 125,000 times. And the reason was, of course, they didn't have the physical ability to pronounce the words. But basically, the repetition of a word, when you're little, you hear it, kids come and they hear it and they hear it. And here you come into some of the theoretical stuff. The first one, Chomsky, Noah Chomsky. Anybody know or ever heard Noah Chomsky? Okay. He's not really in my good books right now, but he's really old and I think he's a friend of Epstein's, by the way. But Noah Chomsky, as a linguist, was the guy who put forward the accepted theoretical basis for how we acquire language. And that is, the brain is pre-wired for language. Can I hear it?
The brain is pre-wired for language.
What does that mean? It means when you're born, a part of your brain, the language part, is there. It's empty, it's ready to be filled. It's ready like a computer, ready to be programmed. The only thing you need is to be surrounded by language, a rich language environment, and you will speak. What he found with his own children, they were like 2 years old, and they were like, Dad, he ran after me and he hit me. And then whatever. And then later when they were 4, he said, Dad, he runned after me and he hit me. You ever heard that from a kid? Yeah. Why? Because the whole thing is the listening, and then comes the process of what's the pattern. As we learn as kids, the ED, except for the irregulars. And in fact, if you look at the first 50 words in any language, those are irregular verbs. Why? Because we use them a lot. Like my shoes, I use them a lot, they're irregular. The more you use something, the more it's going to change. The ones you don't use, they'll pretty much stay the same. So what Chomsky found out through this process of watching his kids acquire language was that the brain is pre-wired for language. Another confirmation of that theory was, anybody remember when the Soviet Russia went downwards and they went to Romania and they got that guy Ceausescu? Remember that guy, bastard, dictator? No? Oh, it wasn't that long ago. Anyway, they found these orphanages where these children had been stacked. parents were killed or whatever. They were just stacked in cribs. Nobody paid attention. They fed them, changed them, and left them alone. A couple from Minneapolis went there and adopted 4 of them. 2 of them were under the age of 2, and they developed normal language skills. The ones that were older, between 2 and 5, never. They never were able to speak. There's that window which you absorb language where your brain is pre-wired. Now, if you think of your own children and yourselves, that process is slow. They'll begin with bottle, and then run, and then ran, and graduate, once they're educated, to the level of reading, say, the 9th grade, like the New York Times. They get to 40,000 words. It's a gradual process. What do adults do? That's a good question. How do you get those 40,000 words? You don't get them all at once, but you gotta get a lot. Because as I said before, language is a skill. In order to do it, you have to practice. In order to practice, you have to know, like tennis, at least how to get the ball over the net. So I have to get people talking first. How is that done? Here comes the second guy. Chomsky, Vygotsky. The 3 guys actually are Russian Jews. Vygotsky is the guy who, somebody's nodding over there. You know Vygotsky? Anybody else? He's not well known. Okay. Vygotsky was the guy who said the zone of proximal development.
Yes.
So say anybody here taking a language, Spanish class or whatever that's with a bunch of people? Yeah? What happens? Some guy's better, some guy's worse. The teacher doesn't have time to correct your pronunciation. It's a fiasco. You may come out speaking Spanish horribly, or you may come out and say, I'm not doing this, it's too hard. It's one-on-one. It's one-on-one, like with your parents. It's really, unless they're young, or unless you have a highly motivated group which are at the same level and are really, rigorously able, which I did with these kids from the Teachers College. Anybody, Ginger, remembers? Tell them about it, Ginger.
Well, they needed to pass their English exam in order to get their teacher certification. So Lena has volunteered to work with them for years. They're 40 minutes away in Atakisa. So, sorry. It's just they're students who are training to be teachers in Atakisa at the rural normal school. They're required to pass an English exam in order to get their teacher certification. Thank you. So Lena, over the years, has volunteered to work with them many times to help them practice, just get the practice in with native English speakers. So it's been a huge help.
So what happened one year, this summer? Remember the 2 weeks?
Well, she offered an intensive English training for those students, so many of them came. I don't know how many, 15, 20?
15 or 16.
And so they divided up and stayed in our homes, different homes of Lena's students and others, and went to class every day and just practice, and they've all done really well.
They have done, not only done well, and thanks Ginger for organizing it too, not only did they do well, but actually 2 of them, Fatima, is going to go teach in the States this year. Yeah, through a cultural exchange, and Uciel also is on the, they both have master's degrees, not in English, but in education. But most of all, both of them and all of them said, being in Ajijic, seeing a different kind of life, a different culture, completely changed their lives. And that's what knowing a language does. Phil knows it. Anybody who speaks fluent, more than one language knows how it changes your life. Anyway, back to Vygotsky. Zone of proximal development. So if you are 0, you come to this place, Roy, would you say 0?
Yeah.
And what would you say with David, who is now reading the Argentine novel, The Secret in Your Eyes, made into a film?
Yeah.
Big difference. But David was highly motivated, and and Roy is an artist. So anyway, so what you have to be, as if you're say 0, you have to go from 0 to +1. If you're at a 1, you go from +1 to +2 to +3 to +4 until you get to a level, and then bye, see you later, and you go out and talk. Or you want to stay and we read books together, we have a great time and chat. So it has to be one-on-one. That's why this so-called way of teaching never is going to be commercially viable, except maybe at a university level, again, with a program like that. But I'm going to tell you how you can do it by yourself. if you really want to. So you got Vygotsky, and Vygotsky also had this socialization thing. You have to be around people. As Ginger said, you have to be able to talk to people, which is not as easy as you would think in IKK. Because a lot of people in service, they speak English, and they want to practice their English. You have to insist to speak Spanish, but it works, it can work. And then you come to the third Russian Jew, Polanski, which was my husband, who died in 2002. And Marco had a funny background, not funny, actually, pretty tragic. But he was born in Trieste, which is northern Italy. His father, who was a Russian Jew, was first in Beirut and ended up in Trieste. They had 2 children. Decided to get out of Italy because the Nazis were coming, the whole fascist thing in Italy. And so they went to France. So Marco learned Italian at home, French in kindergarten. His dad, trying to change money into gold, got arrested. It was against the law, ended up in prison, died of stomach cancer in prison. So Marco went back to Trieste, was in the war. He had to hide, like Anne Frank, because the Nazis, the Germans, occupied northern Italy and spent a lot of, so he didn't go past 5th grade. After the war, he wanted to get out of Europe, and so they prepared, there's an aliyah for people going to Israel. He was 15 when the war ended, 16 when he got on the ship. Anybody who's read Exodus knows that story. The British stopped the ship. He ended up in Cyprus for a year, and then finally Israel, where he learned Hebrew. After the War of Independence, he was early to know, I don't like this stuff. Stowed away at a boat, went back to Italy, got married, had 2 kids, no work, because Italy lost the war. Ends up in Sweden, learned Swedish, Italian, French, Hebrew, Swedish. His wife didn't like Sweden, too cold, left with the kids. He works as a garbage man. One day on the tram he meets, I know it sounds stupid, but it's true, an American millionaire from Palm Beach, also Jewish, Alta, List. There's a List building at Brown University, there's a List road in Palm Beach. So the garbage man and the heiress meet on a tram in Sweden. She brought her 2 Afghans and Siamese cat and her Corvette over. Her mother came to meet him. And when he left, the garbage truck picked him up, and she's like, what the hell? Anyway. So they end up in Massachusetts, and Marco's looking for a job. They test him, because of course they have context. Turns out he's a genius. And they send him to Brown University, studies comparative literature. Wow. Everything goes well, until they say, you have to learn Spanish. We're going to send you to Harvard Summer School. He goes to Harvard Summer School. No way. What is this shit? Por, para, estar, ser, conjugating verbs, what? Because he learned it in the kitchens, in the garbage truck, listening and imitating. Remember this thing, listening and imitating. Where's the salad? Ensalada, everything. You learn by doing, by listening, and he had to learn because he had to survive, okay? He ends up at Brown University, as I said. He can't learn Spanish. What does he do? 1968, he comes to Ajijic. He came to Ajijic with his family. He hired a guy and told him, all right, you're just going to talk to me in Spanish all day. True, he had Italian and he had French and other languages. But it's just different enough to really screw you up. Is anybody who knows it? But afterwards, he ended up passing the exam at Brown, graduating summa cum laude. He didn't like the States, and he came to, he went actually to Tepoztlan, which is outside of Mexico City, and started a university. 1970, anybody heard of Andrew Weil, the healthy guy? He had a grant from, I think it was Ford Foundation or Rockefeller, to study hallucinogenic drugs in Mexico. He comes with his 2 girlfriends, that guy. Comes to his college, he really needs Spanish because he bullshitted himself way into this. It's okay, it's the day of the cross. And anyway, he ends up learning Spanish in 2 months, and I'm just going to read a little piece here. It's okay, spoiled. It's an excerpt from Dr. Andrew Will's book published in 1980. I became one of the first students in a new experimental school called the Colegio de Tepoztlan under the direction of Marco Polanski, an offbeat teacher and unforgettable character. Marco's philosophy of learning languages was out of the ordinary, but struck me as correct. He said that we all had the capacity to learn language since we did it as infants. It had nothing to do with intellect, but rather was an operation of the unconscious mind. The only abilities it depended upon were accurate listening and accurate imitating. Therefore, the way to learn a new language is to want to learn it badly and immerse yourself in it, letting as much of it flow into the unconscious mind as possible. Whether you understand it or not is irrelevant. Forget about grammar books and formal instruction, Marcus said. Just listen and imitate. Which brings me, the first thing you have to do with a language, you have to have at least 1,000 hours of listening to the new language. So that your brain starts to separate the sounds, starts to hear. How many of you guys, when you started with the Spanish with me, una camioneta blanca llega a la cárcel, etc. Over and at the beginning, you're like, what? The sounds that all. Eventually, repeating it over and over, you get this. And then the part is the retrieval. You have to be able to know how to bring the stuff back. That's another trick. So I'm going to come to an end. I'm not going to bore you guys too much anymore. But you do have to remember that adult learners are different from children. First of all, you think, oh, I'm too old, I can't learn a language. That's not true at all. You learn it in the same way. The only thing is your brain, as we talked about with Chomsky, is pre-wired for language. You have to start with something simple. The mariachi movie that I use is a really dark comedy with people getting killed. Many people say, oh, I can't do that with the thing. It's like saying, I don't like the color of that bus. It's a vehicle. Find something with action, with very little dialogue to watch. And then listen to the first episode over and over with the English subtitles, with the Spanish, without subtitles, over and over again until it's imprinted on your brain. Now, talking about how many words we have to have in order to speak a language, you have to think this. A kid doesn't have the things we have. First of all, those of you here have time. You have time to do stuff. You can do 2-3 hours a day. Not studying. It's not studying in the way that you think. It's watching a movie. It's listening to music. It's surrounding yourself with Spanish. Having each room in your house has a different device on it, and you can click on it, and in the background while you're washing dishes, while you're, whatever you're doing, you just can't be talking, you have to be alone, you have to be quiet. In your car, driving someplace. Literally brainwashing yourself in Spanish. Marco called this way of learning brain behavior control. Can you imagine in the 70s how that sounded? Not good. BBC has a good sound, so I said, well, how about brain-based curriculum? That's what it is. You're literally, but you are brainwashing yourself in the language. You're just hearing it over and over and over again. Okay, to finish up, I'm going to leave this here if anybody wants to take the instruction. I think I'm done with the rest of this stuff. Yeah. Is this. First, you need 1,000 hours of listening. Tell me.
1,000 hours of listening.
Choose a movie or series in the target language with subtitles in English and Spanish that you can control. Number 1, listen and watch with English subtitles.
Listen and watch with English subtitles.
Write the unknown vocabulary and then review it.
Write the unknown vocabulary and then review it.
Record this vocabulary.
Record this.
Test yourself on it over and over. How many times? Otzi.
1,000.
Thank you. Then you're going to say you watch it first in English, know what it's saying. You watch it in Spanish, writing down the vocabulary you don't know, because everybody knows a little bit of Spanish. Then watch it without subtitles. Without, 3 ways. With English, with Spanish, without. And again, until you got it. Once you want to vomit after you've seen it, that's about when you're done. That's about when I'm really, I'm not taking any beginners. I can't do that movie anymore. How many times you have to say it?
64.
Hey. And yeah, you have to repeat it. So, and then practice phrases around it, pick another movie, repeat. Until you start talking. You know, you're going to start recognizing what people say. You're going to start hearing phrases that you've heard on the movie. And you can get a job as a waiter in Thank you for listening.